There is no second best.
By becoming rich.
Take all your money and buy Bitcoin.
I say what we
You
say.
can wake up every morning and say GM.
GM. GM. Today is Tuesday, 22nd of October. Daily levels. Let's go. So, Bitcoin's starting to pull back. Market's starting to pull back a little bit. Looking here at relative strength of BTC, Ethereum, which is purple, and Total 3, which is the sort of red line. And you can see that from the local high, Bitcoin made a clear new high, whereas Total 3 didn't. Total 3 at the bottom actually made a lower high, and Ethereum did push towards its highs, so it basically did a false break out of its own highs. But it's more about this recent period here, where BTC stopped going up, and then you saw a push from Sunday into Monday, which was almost exclusively on alts. Bitcoin did try to break out above 69, but barely moved. Whereas Ethereum had a real push, and the alts did as well. So that, coupled with the increase of bullish sentiment and leverage and the margin borrowing that I mentioned in trading analysis, would point towards a pullback. So we've started that pullback. Question now is, where does it go? How far? And if we look at ETH, because it's the first time that ETH has actually had some kind of relevance in quite a while, it's pushed above this high and falling back. So it's still within essentially what is a bottoming out process, which I do think the bottom's in for ETH, and I do think that ETH will go higher. However, that move up is probably going to lead to some consolidation before a break. And if we see a fast reversal, which I think we can for BTC especially, and we'll show ETH in relation to that, I think that's going to provide probably the conditions for ETH to make its way up into this gap. Now, after that point, you want to be looking at the next pullback. So Solana, same thing, but better. Solana has broken out of its bottoming range and actually held. So Sol would seem to be a better setup here for immediate continuation, although it's heading up into resistance above. So my expectation would be that if Sol continues higher, it probably tops out there and comes back to form a higher low before eventually running, unless it's able to just grind past 180 and continue. I would suspect that there's probably some further pullbacks to come. But the initial next move, I would actually lean towards up moves. If we go over and look at this aggregate chart, is it this one? It's not this one. Aggregate chart. Which one was it? No, it's BTCUSD. No, it's not that one. Is it this one? No. So many charts. Found it. It was actually this one. So, GM. Mentioned this path way back in July, from the July FOMC meeting marking a local top to the September meeting came after a local bottom, but a similar kind of thing where we would take out the lows, which you did, we would hold and consolidate, which you did, and then start to grind towards all-time high, which we're currently doing. If you're looking at that in terms of this path, you're somewhere on the way here towards the all-time high, at which point you get a pullback or some kind of consolidation. And how I would see that forming from here is, I don't think the pullback's going to come right now. The path I mentioned before for BTC, which would only kick into place once it starts to break below this level that you can see there. The path for Bitcoin to have a deeper correction would require it to fail to bounce off the bands and then break the red line and then make its way down into some of these gaps below. It wouldn't be my highest probability outcome. I think actually that BTC is going to bounce from the bands here, as it is hitting right into its daily bands or very close to it. I think it's more likely to actually hold and make a new high, which will induce more longs as people chase in, especially towards the end of the month. I mentioned on Weekly Outlook about Bitcoin tendency to pull back around the 21st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, up to the 25th is when you typically see Bitcoin pullbacks throughout a month, or at least negative red days, followed by historically a strong end to the month and beginning of the next month. So seeing a strong rally into the end of the month, followed by some kind of correction to form a higher low and fill some of these gaps where I've drawn that blue box. I think that, whether it goes to there, whether it goes shallower, I think that it's a reasonable expectation for a liquidity type of environment, which means it pushes to new highs, takes out these highs, stops people out, gets breakout longers to come in, and then pulls back to all the stops that will have built up in here. All the while still holding like above the 200-day, still remaining fully bullish, still not breaking below 64k, but that push being a area which will cause people to get stopped out, exit, panic, sell, whatever you want to call it. So I'm watching for that. If we go above these highs, I'll be watching for low time frame weakness for a potential reversal back down to form a proper higher low. Because at that point, if we do continue here, we would not have formed a higher low since 10th of October. If we go up to here and we go to the end of the month, we're talking 3 getting on for 4 weeks almost, where Bitcoin has been rallying without any kind of proper higher low forming. And I would expect that we do see one. That'll either come in the form of a lengthy sideways period, which you could see. That's like what we're seeing here, is if Bitcoin just goes sideways, doesn't push higher, it can form a higher low at that level because it's a sign of consolidation and a sign of new positions being built. I tend to think it's probably going to be more like this path, because that would be more of a little bit more volatile, a little bit more emotional swings where people are, getting excited followed by getting cautious or anxious, and would allow BTC to essentially build itself a nice base before a breakout to all-time high, which would look like this, where it's actually starting to consolidate towards the top end of this range, which is something Bitcoin has not been able to do. Over the last 7 or 8 months, it's spent the majority of the time below 65. If you're looking at 65 as a level here, the majority of Bitcoin's price action has been below, with only really since May, it hasn't been able to sustain more than a week or so above the 65 area. So if it does follow this path, that would actually be a very strong sign for BTC, because it's spending the majority of the time above that. And essentially, what all that is a high time frame flip of 65k from being mostly a resistance into a support. So that's what I'm watching for as a higher time frame path right now. Lower time frame. So I've mentioned this yesterday, and if I take off some of these bands below, these are the daily bands that I've added. So this is the daily 1221. And I said yesterday the pulling back here is exactly where it should not go below. Otherwise, you're really seeing more signs of weakness than strength in the short term. And losing that 67k area opens Bitcoin up for a potential for a lower high bounce, where if it goes down like this, I would expect any bounce to probably reach a lower high and have to chop around more. And so staying in this area, not going below 65, that's the big level, with options expiry coming up, and not breaking above 70, again, with the options, before Friday, I would have expected to see Bitcoin go sideways. So yesterday, it came down to the lowest point where it could go. As long as it holds here, that's all fine. It can still follow broadly this kind of path. And if it does, if you see Bitcoin staying in this area, same end result, I think it breaks out to the upside. But certainly, there seems to have been more of a little bit more weakness than you would ideally want to see if you're looking at immediate continuation. You zoom out to like a 4 hour. The 4 hour bands have flipped red. So we've lost the 4 hour trend. So it did not get defended first time. That's fine. It can do that. It has done that in the past. And again, if it chops around and gets back above, then it's all good. But I would say if you're looking at these immediate continuation paths, using a 4 hour, for example, you need to see it reclaim, right? Because in a consolidation that is eventually a bullish one, you can see the bands get lost, but Bitcoin does not sell off any deeper and then reclaims. You see here, Bitcoin consolidates, the bands do go red briefly, but it reclaims and goes. The difference here is the Bitcoin bands only went red while it was consolidating, not when it was selling off. So the actual sell-off, bands didn't go red, they stayed green. Same over here. It was not a sell-off that caused the bands to go red. It was Bitcoin consolidating inside a range, so the bands compressed. Whereas here, it seems like Bitcoin has actually sold off under the bands a bit quicker. So essentially, the 4-hour trend did not get defended really at all since the start of the week or end of last week. And so if you're looking at it from what's the actual primary trend here, well, we've broken structure. So there's a market structure break. Bands are red. And unless that can be reclaimed, you'd be saying there's more likelihood of just a 4-hour downtrend to begin. Maybe it goes down and fills in some of these gaps. Maybe it goes down towards the levels below. So looking at that, I think BTC is overall fine. All of this forms a higher low eventually. I don't think that there's anything really to be bearish about here. It's more a case of too much short-term hype and expectation as Bitcoin went to 69, just above 69. And the market was really treating it as if this was a breakout when it was right at the most important level, which is take these off here, 70K. 70K is the level. It's the big round number. It's above all-time high. So previous cycle all-time high was 69. 70 is a level that we've only been at this cycle. So it's super important for Bitcoin to get above 70 to have any chance of breaking out. And then when we pushed in here, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days where it just does a rounded top and is unable to break any higher, it just seemed like expectations got way ahead of reality in the short term about how viable this breakout was, and it needs more consolidation. So I suspect these bands will hold and that we follow that original path, which can take it to new highs. And if it does, I'll be watching for, a reversal back below, which is, where are we looking at here? Here we go. I'll take a look at this now, draw this out, and we will show this. Essentially, if the bands hold, I'll be expecting it to move above the bands and then back below them, and then liquidity on either side gets swept. That'd be my current view. Just very similar to what it was over here. We broke out, so traps longs, comes down, sweeps the shorts, traps longs, trap shorts, runs up. We've now ran up above a high, we've trapped longs. If we trap more longs above, I expect them to get flushed out here, trap shorts below, and then away it goes. Until something changes significantly about the structure of this move, I don't see a reason why it wouldn't continue to follow a typical upwards sloping accumulation. And that's what this really is to me. It's all accumulation, it's all bullish, but in an upward sloping accumulation, you don't see strong impulsive trends. You see moves, impulse moves, that then reverse, but they reverse into higher lows. So until we have some kind of strong 75K breakout, I would expect more of the same, more of this kind of taking highs, reversing, taking lows, until sentiment is sufficiently in disbelief, I would say. We have had a really good sentiment reset throughout the month. I talked about this on the Bitcoin deep dive, or throughout the summer, I should say. And historically, stuff like leverage and open interest and all of that, funding rates and spot premium and all that, they're not at crazy levels. There is no major signs of like bull market euphoria. So I think it's just a more of a level of excitement building rather than anything euphoric, meaning the market is getting itself positioned or trying to get positioned for what it thinks is going to be a big Bitcoin breakout. And with how it's moving, I think that is going to take more time. So I've said December all along, and I still think December is where we properly see Bitcoin make a run towards the all-time highs, because I think that currently, if it were to impulse hard from here above 75, 80, I'd have less confidence in that one actually holding, because it hasn't spent much time actually forming a higher low since, the last proper higher low was over here, early September. This, to me, looks more like an internal structure where it dips down, sweeps the lows, flushes people out on the short side, or trap short, sorry, flushes people out on the long side, runs to the most local highs. And it's just not a typical structure you would see for a breakout. It absolutely can run to 75, 76. But if it does, I would expect that to form a high and drop back and form a proper higher low and then run from there. So probably still a few weeks away. The election is going to be the pivotal point around here, I think. And, you know, if Trump wins, you're going to see a big candle if Trump wins. So where's Bitcoin going to be at that point? I think it's much better for Bitcoin to actually be not in a very bullish uptrend when the election itself comes. Because if you see like here, this would be the election around here. So if it did move up and down and then Trump wins, you can see a big move coming off of a low rather than coming off of a high. Because if the market's going up and up and up and up and up and Trump wins, that's going to be more likely for a reversal because you've had an uptrend and then a pump. And so people will come into the FOMO and hype and you'll have exit liquidity. Whereas if there's a bit more uncertainty and you've gone down slightly into it, but you've formed a base, and then Trump wins, that's much more likely to be a breakout that holds. Because you're not rising off an uptrend into the election, you're actually coming off a consolidation. So we'll see how all that goes. Yesterday, stocks consolidating at all-time high. Seems like there's at least a low time frame reversal coming in here, where last Thursday they took out the highs, dropped back, seems to be forming a base here. I would suspect that they drop down a bit to at least take some of these stops below from early of last week. I don't think it needs to go here necessarily, but that would be the next strong support. So you could see it come down into support there until the election and then maybe push on from there. I think end of year we're going to see strong flows into the stock market, as you tend to do whenever the stock market is rising. The dollar rally continues, just something to keep an eye on. Gold rally continues, and gold outperforming BTC is going to be negative for Bitcoin in the short term. It's when the gold run ends that you see the Bitcoin run begin properly. That's how I'm viewing it, at least. And whenever I say gold run ends, it doesn't mean gold goes to zero. It just means that gold, drops off into a consolidation. And if it does that, it's this part here where you see gold actually having its first sell-off, that BTC relative strength can have its biggest run. But when gold is basically just up only in a parabolic move, it's going to steal all the attention and the flows away from something like BTC for anyone who does view them as the same thing, i.e. like a store of value play. And then it's going to be, there's still tensions in the Middle East with war and stuff like that. And, if there's going to be more strikes and attacks, you're going to see gold continue to rise because that's just even more uncertainty. And you won't properly see the gold rally end until there is some kind of resolution, which my expectation is that if Trump wins, that becomes more likely because at least historically Trump has been an anti-war president. Whether that remains the case, nobody knows. However, if there's an expectation that there's not going to be any chances of peace under Democrats like Biden, so wars have started under Biden. They didn't start under Trump. And so Harris is going to be more of the same, at least in the eyes of the market. And I think that the market will have more confidence that there could be some kind of peace if Trump wins, because that's been the historical tendency. And you can see him coming out and saying stuff and saying that he doesn't want Iran to be terrible. He wants good things for Iran. He wants peace. He's at least saying the right things. Whether he's going to do it, it's another matter. But I think that is something the market's going to be focused on too. And that is about it for this morning. GM. Oil. Yeah. So oil, after having its little pop there, doesn't seem to be signaling too much in the way of major geopolitical fears. Because obviously if there's a war escalation in the Middle East, you'd expect oil to moon, because it's one of the things that will get affected the most. And as for alts across the market, few alts, few meme coins pumping. Popcat, I talked about Popcat last week or a couple of weeks ago with this, pretty much this exact kind of pattern where you would see it consolidate at the highs for a few weeks and then push on. It seems to be doing that. So that seems primed for a breakout if the market remains solid. Aptos moving. Aptos actually starting to break out from its own consolidation. So altcoins here and there are starting to run. Pepe continues to consolidate. I think Pepe needs much more time. Such a big meme coin, such a big asset, and a lot of people's bet for the next phase of bull as one of the best memes is probably going to take even longer to be choppy and consolidating around there. But this is good. If this breaks out to the upside, it's a nice 2-3 week consolidation post first rally, and if it starts to make new highs from there, that's when you'll see it probably have a move up towards some of this resistance above before another pullback. We might see it like that and then kick on from there. And that is it. GM. I'll actually look at this Sol ongoing volume profile that we've had since the top. It's now breaking and holding for the first time in quite a while above its value area high. So if Sol can stay there, it's probably one of the best setups to run towards its next liquidity level, which is about 193, and then obviously 2024 highs, which are above that. So the longer Sol can hold and stay above this area, that's where I'll be looking at to go next. And that is it. GM.